Even though we often know better, our nervous systems still frequently can drive us to frenzy or overwhelm, particularly when things seem dangerous or dire. Today, we're going to talk about how to find regulation in times of great stress or great overwhelm. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where we look at things through a nervous system perspective, can help you transform the way you live, love, and relate. Each week, I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Steve, how are you today?
Hi, Jeffrey. I'm doing great today. Thanks for asking. How are you doing?
I'm well. I don't know if I could say great, but I'm very well. I'm glad you're great.
I'll carry great for the both of us here.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate the assist. So what do you got for us this week?
Well, we've got a voicemail that I'll play. We'll take a listen, and then we'll unpack what's going on. And just a quick reminder here for our friends that if you want to send us a voicemail, we've got info in our show notes as well as at the end of the episode. But Jeffrey, let's take a listen to this anonymous caller's question.
Great.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Rutstein. I'm calling with a question about working with trauma in real time while still being in an ongoing stressful situation. I have a history of significant financial trauma, losing homes in earlier periods of my life. And I'm currently in a financial situation that strongly mirrors those experiences. And I can clearly see the connection, and I understand cognitively that my nervous system is reacting to those previous experiences, even though the current situation I'm going through is very real and very stressful. So the challenge is that the awareness alone isn't helping me regulate in the moment. So my question is this: when someone is still inside a deeply triggering situation, something is causing just feeling of high anxiety and overwhelm, and there really is no end in sight, how do you actually work with the nervous system in real time so you don't get pulled into those old survival responses? I'm hoping this makes sense, but it's something that I'm really deeply struggling with, and there's just so many times where I just feel like I cannot get past what is just feeling like a tsunami, and I just kind of just want to give up.
Definitely feeling into the tenderness of his question and the earnestness with which he's looking for relief. And Jeffrey, it occurs to me, we've had like kind of similar questions to this, that like solving or approaching our healing or nervous system regulation from the thinking mind. But there's something else that I think you clued into that's going on here. And maybe we could just start there of like helping us unpack how this might be different from ways we've approached this topic in the past, and then let us know what you've sort of heard in this gentleman's question.
Sure. So, something that we've said on and off over our broadcast is the idea that insight alone can be helpful, but it's not curative. Having insight is a necessary and supportive step to getting context and understanding what happened. But insight alone doesn't change the nervous system. The nervous system speaks and operates at the level of the body. It doesn't really respond to when you tell it, stop worrying, stop being so doom-oriented, be a little lighter. It can't do anything with those. It doesn't know how to do something with those. So I hear our caller has good insight about that this is reminding him of past traumatic events with finances, when he's had to lose homes before and how stressful that's been, and the shame that can get evoked with that, and the sense of failure and personal disappointment. There's so much pain that can come along with any kind of overwhelming life problems, but in particular, financial situation issues are a very big one. So the first step is something he already has, which is an awareness that there's something in his current situation that is bringing with it a charge, because it's so similar to past traumas that it's really hard for him to regulate. It's hard for him to not get pulled into overwhelm or frenzy or frustration or just needing to shut down because it becomes too much. But I think there's also a little bit of a separation in this, right? That our mind can make such a good argument about why we should be flipped out that we tend to listen to that and say, okay, well, I can't regulate until my financial situation is in order, until I can rest a little bit easier, or until I get this new job or this new raise or whatever it is. And there can be some sense to that for sure, but if we condition our regulation on the situation outside of us, we're going to spend most of our life very dysregulated and unhappy. So if I need life to be a certain way for me to be okay or happy or safe, I'm going to always be looking for life to be that way, and it's never, ever going to be that way. It's always going to be a little off. I'm always going to be looking for the life I don't quite have, or I don't feel tested or overwhelmed, or I always feel safe. Having been at various points in my life in financial stress, I know that it's a horrible choice. The stress feels very real and very compelling. But what I'd invite people to do is to begin to discern the current reality aspects of the situation versus the past belief aspects of this situation, right? So on one level, we could have the current reality-based fear that if I don't have enough money, I can't pay my mortgage or I can't pay my health insurance. And so those are very, very stressful things. But we often then can get caught up in the second arrow of suffering. So the first arrow is, I don't have enough money in the bank. The second arrow is when I start blaming me. Why am I such a crap that I don't take better care of my finances? Why haven't I saved more money? Why haven't I been more prudent? So right when we're feeling the stress of finances, often people will often feel a sense of shame and self-blame for, I got myself in this situation. I didn't make good judgments about spending, or I didn't make good judgments about saving, or I was, kicked to the curb because I lost my job. But there's often a sense of blame and shame for our problem. And that can often continue to feed the dysregulation. So that when we have this overwhelm, if we listen very carefully, feeling the situation isn't going to change, there's a direness and a desperation that you'll pick up in the inner voice. Oh my God, we're not going to make it out of this. We're not going to survive. This is horrible. What will people think? So it's really important to start paying attention to what the nervous system is saying back through the inner narration, through the voice in your head and what it's saying about the situation and about you. That's a great way to begin to tune into what's going on.
Now, what do we do when some of those fears that we might carry or shame that we might carry were, I don't know, the word coming to mind is like planted without our, out of our control, right? Maybe something that happened to us in childhood versus decisions that we've made as adults.
Right. But often if kids have abuse in childhood, they're often blamed for it. I mean, almost no parent comes into a child's space and says, hi, I'm really dysregulated, I'm slightly drunk, and I have no emotional capacity to cope as an adult, so I'm going to beat you up. No one says that. They come in and they start screaming that you've done this or you haven't done that, and they're explaining and rationalizing their behavior or harshness or cruelty because of a failure on the child's point. So shame gets us to do that to ourselves. So if I'm running into a problem financially, my nervous system is going to first lean into me. What have I done to let this happen, to make this happen? What have I not paid attention to, that I should have been paying attention to, that would have kept me safe. So there's this recrimination and blame and upset, and that keeps us stirred. That really keeps us stirred up. And so if I make up a story about our caller, and I've sort of been speaking it a little bit along the way, is that he's got this bubbling up of feelings of the stress, the ongoing, relentless stress of being behind financially. But then I believe he's got this other piece about making him feel very, very, very unsafe, maybe even beyond just the financial piece of it, and seeing it also as a moral referendum on his ability as a human being to manage finances. And especially with a history of some financial issues before, I could see this could pour right back into, oh my God, I'm right back here. So I have tremendous compassion for our caller because it's a really horrible place to be in. But just like with someone with cancer or chronic pain or a disability, there are things in life that we also have to begin to find a way to meet and be with, just because it's reality, right? Like I may hate being low in finances, but as long as I hate it and am terrified of it, I'm mostly just suffering, and I'm not going to do much to actually help me make more money. Even if I do manage to get some directed action out of that, to apply for other jobs or to start something else to bring in more money, it's going to be coming from this sense of desperation and utter lack of respect towards ourselves.
So how do we start to separate what our caller call, I'm just looking at the written text of their question, sort of the real-time nervous system situation versus the older survival response? How do we start to, in the moment, maybe not in the moment, how do we start to hold both of those in their correct light and work with them?
Right. So many of the times we put our happiness, our ability to be functioning, our ability to be less stressed on the outside condition of the world. When this argument gets settled, when the house closes, when I get the new job, when my beloved accepts my proposal, we base our happiness and our regulation and our stability and safety upon having things happen. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting things to happen, but the truth is that if we make happiness something that's outside of us, that we have to get or achieve, that we have to have this relationship to be happy or feeling this way to be happy, we're telling ourselves a story that our unhappiness is only because of the situation. And that's not really the full truth, right? Like, let me go back to me. When I was in tight financial straits before, my mind would take it to, this will be the end of me. This will be my ruin. I'll lose my house. I'll lose everything. I'll lose everyone's respect. I'll lose everything, right? Now, the truth is, even if that had happened, it would have been difficult. It would have been stressful. But what was making it traumatic was the shame I had about it. What would other people think of me? What would I think of me? I couldn't bear to see or look at other people if this is what happened to me. That becomes actually, for most people, even the bigger source of the pain is the shame that we're in this situation. That's what we can begin to discern. So I could be worried about my finances. I can be under pressure. I could want them to be better. But I also know from my years of work in this, if I'm just drowning in it, right, I don't have access to the resources that would actually help me move forward and do something for my financial situation. Instead, I'm just kind of marinating in self-hate and disappointment. So one of the ways that we can discern this is the level of upset that we feel regarding a situation. Now, we've also spoken on here before about neuroception. the ability of our nervous system has to feel into the nervous systems of mammals around us. We can have two types of neuroception, matched or mismatched. Matched is when I pick up a signal from you and it's actually correct. I pick up danger and you are dangerous, or I pick up safety and you're safe. Mismatched is when I pick up something but it's wrong. I pick up that you're dangerous, but you're not. Or my neuroception says you're a very safe man, but you're not. In a situation like this, there is some mismatched neuroception going on. It feels like it's all matched and accurate from this horrible, death-like situation I am in with my finances. But that's not the complete truth. Part of it is from now. But part of it is from this old stored trauma of being likely to be at fault, of being the one who makes your own bed and has to lie in it too. There's something lingering from childhood. This is not just being responsible. This is beyond just being a responsible person. This is feeling like a person then who has inadvertently made their own demise, made their own pain and trauma, made their own failure. And no child ever makes a parent abuse them or a situation abuse them, and no adult who hasn't had trauma, I mean, no one really deliberately sabotages themselves. But we sometimes are not allowed to take care of our money if we have a lot of shame, because that reflects a level of self-worth. So something else I would invite our caller to begin to pay attention to is, I mean, sometimes our financial problems are just the result of the time in the world. Right? That it's a recession, or this particular field is suffering, or people are being much more tight on their expenditures. But sometimes it's also because we don't believe that we're allowed to be comfortable or to be paid well. So I guess I would invite our caller to also look at how much shame may be making him feel that if he's anything less than stressed and overwhelmed right now, that he's actually going to be in more danger. Because there is an economy we can create inside where if I stay worried, I mean, so many of us do this, we worry about something in the hopes that if I worry enough, the bowling ball won't go in the gutter, it'll go straight ahead and hit the pins. If I just worry enough. And I think we kind of all carry that inner economy of magic, right? Somehow, if I'm not worrying about this, even worse things are going to happen. And if I'm not worrying about this, I'm as much as contributing to my demise because I'm not paying scared attention to this. So those would be some of the things I'd invite our caller and others who struggle with this to begin to look at. What are your assumptions about this? And how much is this feeling like it is almost like a life or death danger? Even losing our money is not going to be a life or death danger. I mean, being eaten by a tiger would be, shot by someone else's gun would be, finances would be torment, and it would feel very, very, very difficult, but it actually wouldn't be life or death.
It occurs to me there's another layer here that I can see this individual having to potentially overcome, that, this thing that happened to him in the past was true. So as you're talking about matched and mismatched neuroception, I don't know, it doesn't seem fully mismatched, right? Like there is historical evidence at some point of like, well, that happened once.
Yes.
Versus, falsely believing something. I mean, it's tricky because there is a history there. There's a truth there.
Right. There always is. There always is with neuroception. Even if it's mismatched, it was matched to a time when it was accurate.
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
So I'm saying it may be mismatched for the fullness of this moment. It's an accurate recalling of a situation where it was needed and it was true, right? So if I'm predicting a trauma reoccurrence, that's my nervous system predicting based on past evidence. And this person is sad. So that's a very good point. But the bigger dilemma, I think, is if we can get untranced from our believing that it's the situation. As long as I fully am entranced and believe, no, it's a situation and nothing can change unless my wife says this, or my boss does this, or they change this with the traffic lights, or whatever it is, right? Then I'm stuck. I'm waiting for the other person, the world, to change, and can stay angry and triggered and unhappy with myself. Or I can look at my piece in this, right? So anger is a good example. So say you and I have a fight and I'm angry. Now, what I would have done in the past, because I would have been too intimidated to tell you about it, is I would have ruminated about it for days, hours, gone through our argument, repeating the things that I should have said, or the retorts that I would have had to you, and all these things. But maybe by the third or fourth day, I'd realize, what the F am I doing? Like, we're not even on the phone right now. We haven't talked about this for 3 days. And I'm going through my entire day going, and I would say this. And so like we're living in this example of what feels like a really intense piece, right? It's actually a fight. It's a disconnection. That's it. But it's activated something in me that makes me not be able to let go of it. I keep looping on it. It's just like, if I keep looping on it, I not only won't solve it, but I'm creating and deepening my suffering. If I keep looping on my finances, I won't get any closer to solving it. I will only be continually reminding myself about how bad I'm doing, about how bad things are, or about how close I am to ruin. I will just be continually in some way re-traumatizing myself, threatening myself, scaring myself.
As you're sharing, I was glancing over at our caller's question, and my eyes went to the phrase "no end in sight." And when I connect that with the phrase that you shared that I love, that we're entranced by our situation, like there's so much storytelling in that, that in their sharing of their question, it's like baked into the narrative that like this won't end. So that was the first thing that occurred to me. The question I have is, okay, so we need to separate the story, the situation. That we need to learn that we're in this trance and we're being pulled along by this story. But then on the other side, there's the whole nervous system dysregulation thing, right? Like the thing that's happening in the current moment. So I don't know if there's anything more you want to share about letting the trance of the story go. Where I want to go is, how do we start to do both of these in concert or in parallel, or one after the other? Again, I'm trying to get to like the 2 points of the problem that we identified here.
It's a tough ask for this individual, but we're asking them to begin to discern how much of their threat, how much of their unsafety is coming literally from their finances right now, and how much of it is coming from the memory of the past trauma, the fear that this will become just like that, the judgment or shame towards themselves, the recrimination towards themselves. All of those things are playing in. Now, it may be true that there isn't a remedy in sight for him. That could be true, but we still then have to find a way to come back to regulation. Otherwise, we forfeit the rest of our life. In other words, our finances are making us shrink down to the world of finances as a problem, and our life and our self and what we're attuned to and being in our body, we leave all of that and we get sucked into this little laser beam of worry, of preoccupation. And we're just looking at that one variable. How's my bank account doing? And again, I understand these worries. I'm not trying to minimize them. What I'm talking about, though, is that we can have worries and we can relate to them and work with them, or we can have worries and be totally hijacked by them, paralyzed by them, overwhelmed by them, descend into despair and self-blame, or fitless sleep, or just ruminating and worrying and going from one idea to another. In other words, if we're in a defensive state, we're not going to get closer to making money, and we're not going to get closer to supporting our well-being. Being constantly stressed, constantly focused on our problems, constantly in a very negative viewpoint will increase our stress. Cortisol will increase our memory porousness. It's hard to store and retrieve data effectively when we're very stressed. Inner inflammation goes up, depression goes up, anxiety goes up. So the more that we stay in this, and again, we're pushed here because our nervous system thinks it's safe to keep worrying about this, that what happens is we're doing something an old belief is saying, well, this is all you can do. Just worry and try and feel bad, and hopefully it'll get better. That's not actually going to help you get anywhere, right? So the newer way is kind of seeing where you are, seeing that this is a very charged situation. It brings up a lot of pain. One of the things would be to begin to practice in the moment some regulation, bringing your awareness back towards the body, back towards the breath. Because the first thing we do when we get anxious like this is we leave. And then notice every time you come back that your shame or mind is going to try to tell you a story about, but you don't have any money. In other words, every time you try to regulate a little bit, your shame is going to come in with a pin and poke you. This is just what happens. And you kind of need to expect that. That's what I was telling you before, that insight alone doesn't work. You have to actually go back to speaking through and with the body. And that means finding a way in to regulate, following your breath. Or we have that episode we did, I think it's episode 8, that's all part of looking at the nervous system and practices. And also in the free gift I have on the website that could also give you some practices. But part of this is patience and compassion, because it is really hard to find regulation in a time like this. It's possible, but it's helpful to begin to identify the scary stories that your shame is telling you, because that will keep pushing you back into overwhelm and chaos.
It occurs to me, as you've shared in the past, that when we're in this shutdown state, getting the energy to like take action is really far away from us. And I see that as an added challenge potentially here as well, of like, well, how do I get control of my situation or what I'm doing? So I guess I'm just pointing again to the challenge that being in a dysregulated state has in that. I don't know if there's anything else to unpack that low shutdown state we might expect some of the thoughts or things that are happening.
Yeah, I imagine that our caller has a mix of shutdown and sympathetic activation. There's some anxiety, some drive, and some despair and fatigue and feeling low about it, drained about it, dreading it. So, and you're right, that if we're low enough in energy, we don't have the focus and can-do sense to actually let us make a change. And if we're very anxious, while we have energy, sometimes it's hard to focus it. We feel scattered and uncertain about where to aim it. We feel like we're a little bit like a chicken going around with our head cut off, where we have a lot of energy to do something, but we're not getting necessarily anything done. Again, there's no easy cure, but anytime you can move towards a little bit more regulation, 2 toes in regulation, the more ability and resources you'll be able to access, the more that you can figure out what to do. And sometimes what to do is to do nothing in that moment, just to give yourself a rest. A lot of times there's nothing we can do about it. Just wait until a job opens, or we hear back from this resume we sent in, or something else. And a lot of people's worry and problem and overwhelm are in all the moments where it's just on the back burner eating them alive. It's not like they're actually doing something. It's just running like music in an elevator constantly and sort of igniting this fear or shame or unhappiness or despair about the financial situation. We're not even struggling with it or figuring out what to do. We're just feeling slowly crushed under the burden. And that's the other place. If we can recognize that's what's happening, right? And that doesn't serve a purpose. It doesn't help us get closer to solving it or feel better or figure out what to do. It just makes us stay in pain. And so if we can see that, we can get out of it.
So we're talking here about a financial situation that has a history and a story attached to it that maybe some people can identify with or see in their lives, or I guess see easily. What are the patterns similar to this where they might be a little more hidden to the individual? Are there examples that you could offer our audience to help them unpack, is this a situation where I'm stuck in my story, and the story and the reality are mismatched?
So one clue is if you have a situation in your life that you just feel, well, I just have to live like this. It just can't be different. I just have to accept this. Just
that level of certainty, like fully bought in.
Right. If you have that, the first invitation I'd offer is get curious about it. What really makes you think or feel that you know so certain that this won't change? Is there real evidence about this now? Is this actually based more on your past in general? Is this based also on you don't want to hold hope out for someone else? It could be a lot of pieces to this that influence how we feel. But often if we feel that something just can't get better, I can't get better, I'll never get to understand this, maybe some of those things are true, but most of the time they're not. They're foreclosing on our ability out of shame or doubt or lack of confidence in our own self. No, I can't do that. That's too much. And again, I'll never be happy is one I hear. I'll never be in a relationship where I'll feel loved. I don't think there'll be a time in my life where I'll have someone who can help me feel safe. Now, those are real feelings. They truly believe them. But if they could distinguish them as something they were taught to anticipate versus reality, if I am stuck in the reality that I can't do anything to change it, right, then I'm really paralyzed. If I can accept, well, right now I can't change anything financially, but what can I do about how I'm living with this? Can I live a little bit more settled? Can I live a little bit more regulated? Can I live a little bit more free of torturing myself for what I'm not doing? So for people either paying attention to what feels like a story that just can't change, a fact, quote unquote fact that can't change. The other is the feeling that certain things are out of their reach. Happiness, love, fulfillment. That these are often protection-based judgments to try to minimize our disappointment versus an actual knowing, because I've never really met anyone who's not capable of being happy or not capable of changing. There are people who have more struggles and people who have less struggles with it, but people sometimes just need to see that what they believe is holding them back is not the culprit. It's a story.
Hearing you share that, the people feeling like things are just out of reach really brings to mind this idea of worthiness.
Yes.
Of people feeling they're worthy of a thing. And just seeing how being dysregulated may disconnect us from that worthiness. And the other phrase that comes to mind is catastrophizing.
Yes.
Of finding those spots when potentially you add that layer on. I don't know if there's anything else or any other ideas to share around worthiness or that idea of catastrophizing a situation.
Well, I think they both play a point. When we move into catastrophizing, sort of predicting the worst outcome will happen, it's often an expression of our anxiety and an attempt to keep us safer. If I imagine the worst, I'm not overlooking a bad possibility. Then we start confounding, I'm imagining the worst to the worst is going to happen. That's going to be my life. It's going to be this way. And then we feel horrible. So shame in particular plays a large piece in what we consider reachable for us and in what we're entitled to. So a question perhaps to ask the caller is, does he feel entitled to be financially secure? Does he feel entitled that he can enjoy some financial security, or he can manage his money in a comfortable, wise way? Because it may be that some of his issues about worth and money could be playing into literally how much worth and money he has on a financial level.
Jeffrey, as you've started to return to our caller, I want to give you an opportunity here at the end to, I guess, reconnect with him and his question, and to the best you can, put a bow on what you want to share with him.
Sure. So it's a very difficult and trying space that he's in. Lots of people find themselves there and they struggle there. He's not alone. The good news is that there are ways to work with this. Insight is a start, but as he wisely observed, it's not sufficient. What will be repeated, consistent practice with some type of somatic awareness, somatic practices that help nudge his nervous system back into regulation. We can't do it by thought. But again, here's where shame can play a point. Shame can so convince us that this is what we deserve and there's no way to avoid it, that we don't even think about regulating. We think, well, this is just a fact. I can't regulate a fact away. The sun's shining. I can't regulate the sun away. We miss the idea that we're overlooking that it's our state that's driving the story, and we actually can become much more able to shift our state. But that takes time and consistent practice. And I would certainly encourage our caller to begin to explore that journey.
I want to thank our anonymous caller for their vulnerability and their willingness to share, and really do hope that this was helpful. It was helpful for me to hear where you went with this, Jeffrey, and I hope our caller and others got some benefit out of it. Jeffrey, how do people send their question into us, and where can they learn more about you and your work?
Great, thank you. If you'd like to send a question, we'd love to read them. Feel free to leave your question as a voicemail on our number, which is 866-357-5156. You can leave a question there. If for some reason, if you're calling internationally and can't reach that number, feel free to drop us an email, and you can drop it with an audio file so we can play that, or if not, just a written question, and send that to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And finally, if you'd like a free gift that we created on Why Do I Keep Feeling Stuck? It talks about the stuck places we can get into from a nervous system perspective and different practices you can engage to help shift. You can find that at drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, LINKS. When you go there, there'll be a link for the free gift. You can check that out. Steve, thank you as always for being my friend and partner and producer. I love doing this with you.
I share that love, Jeffrey. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and for this conversation. And I'll catch you next week.
Sounds great. Remember, friends, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for appropriate healthcare. If you are struggling, please reach out to a qualified healthcare provider. Thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time, bye for now.